Welcome to my channel, Inside True Stories. James Carter had spent years serving his country with honor, and when he returned home, he expected nothing more than the quiet peace of his suburban neighborhood. At 45, he was disciplined, principled, and deeply proud of his service. His home, a modest but well-kept property, represented stability, the place he and his family had built after years of sacrifice. But one ordinary morning, that peace was shattered. James pulled into his driveway after a long shift at the factory to find bright orange notice of violation signs plastered across his property. Fences had been erected overnight, blocking access to his driveway. His tool shed had been locked by an HOA padlock. The HOA, a faceless, bureaucratic entity that ruled the neighborhood with cold precision, had claimed ownership of parts of his land. James's jaw tightened. He had served overseas, defended lives, and upheld rules in far harsher places than this. Yet here, in his own country, the very authority he had once fought to protect was now taking his property without justification. James's life in Greenwood Estates had been quiet but meaningful. His wife, Monica, worked at a local school, and their two children, Tyler and Lila, loved the small yard where they played freely. The property was more than a house. It was a sanctuary. The HOA, led by Margaret Thompson, a meticulous and intimidating woman in her 60s, prided herself on enforcing rules to the letter. Her board members were equally stern, always armed with forms and fines, but rarely accessible or understanding. Neighbors whispered, some out of sympathy for James, others out of fear of the HOA's influence. Rumors circulated about James being difficult, about the special treatment HOA members claimed some residents received. James tried to maintain calm. He drafted emails, called the HOA office, and tried to appeal the violation notices. Each attempt was met with vague references to obscure clauses, bureaucratic loopholes, and ever-increasing fines. One afternoon, James walked to the HOA office, his heart pounding with both anger and hope. "I just want access to my own property," he said firmly to Margaret, standing behind a glass desk with a stack of folders. Margaret adjusted her glasses and smiled faintly, as though James's presence amused her. "The board has rules, Mr. Carter. Your shed was placed beyond the approved line and the fence encroaches HOA easement. You are in violation." James's fists clenched. "I've lived here 10 years. I've never received a notice before. This is my property. I've paid my dues, my fees, and everything." Margaret's voice was sharp. "Fees do not exempt you from compliance. Rules are rules. We enforce them equally." James left, heart heavy, realizing that the very entity claiming fairness was blind to context, blind to his service, blind to the history of the neighborhood, blind to humanity itself. Weeks passed, and the situation worsened. HOA lawyers sent letters threatening legal action. Contractors arrived, threatening to remove the shed entirely. James was exhausted from the struggle, his evenings spent reading legal documents and preparing appeals. Neighbors watched silently. Some avoided confrontation with the HOA, fearing retaliation. A few older neighbors whispered in support, but their words offered no legal protection. James's pride as a veteran was wounded deeper than he had anticipated. He had defended lives, followed rules, and risked everything for others, and yet here, a faceless bureaucracy was stripping him of dignity and property. It seemed hopeless, until an unexpected voice broke through the tension. Lena Rodriguez, a young attorney and neighbor in the subdivision, had watched James struggle from her own porch. A daughter of immigrants, Lena had a sharp sense of justice and a reputation for noticing details others missed. She approached James one evening while he examined the padlocked shed. "I think they overstepped," she said simply. "If you want, I can help." James was wary. "I don't want to cause more trouble." "I've seen how these boards operate," Lena smiled. "I've handled cases like this before. HOA overreach is common, but it's rarely unprovable. Rules are meant to be transparent. Let's see if they followed procedure." Together, they began collecting evidence: old surveys, tax records, photos of property lines, and emails with HOA officials. Lena noticed inconsistencies in board actions, missing approvals, and rules that weren't properly filed with the county. The breakthrough came when Lena discovered that the HOA had misapplied a rule intended for new constructions to James's established shed. Margaret and her board had ignored procedural requirements. They failed to provide proper notice, ignored James' prior approvals, and even misrepresented survey lines to justify their claim. Even more alarming, Lena uncovered subtle discriminatory patterns. Minority homeowners, particularly Black veterans and families, had been disproportionately fined or targeted for minor infractions. This systemic bias, though hidden under legalese, painted a clearer picture. James was not merely an unlucky neighbor. He had been unjustly singled out. Armed with this evidence, James's confidence began to return. He was no longer fighting alone. The HOA called a special meeting in the clubhouse to discuss James's property. Residents filled the room, some curious, some supportive. Margaret opened with a rehearsed statement about enforcing rules fairly, while the board members nodded along. Then Lena stood. "You claim to enforce rules, but you have failed to follow procedure. You have violated Mr. Carter's rights. We have documentation." She presented the surveys, emails, and evidence of procedural errors. The room fell silent. James spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I served this country. I followed the law. I've paid every fee, every tax, every obligation. What you have done is not enforcement. It is theft, disguised as rules." Neighbors whispered, murmured, and a few clapped softly. The HOA board's composure cracked under scrutiny. One by one, board members admitted mistakes. Margaret, visibly flustered, had no legal ground to stand on. The vote was swift. James's property rights were restored, all fines rescinded, and the HOA board was required to undergo transparency and anti-discrimination training. James unlocked his shed for the first time in months. The driveway barriers came down. Neighbors came by to offer congratulations and handshakes. Lena, standing beside him, smiled. Sometimes justice only comes when someone refuses to look away. James's children, Tyler and Lila, ran around the yard, carefree once again. Monica hugged James tightly, whispering, "You fought overseas, but you fought here too, and you won." The HOA board faced public scrutiny, and the neighborhood became more aware of the importance of fairness and accountability. James became a local hero, not just for his service, but for standing up to injustice in his own backyard. Inside True Stories reminds us that courage and perseverance take many forms. James Carter's story proves that even when systems fail, allies can appear in unexpected places, and the fight for justice is never in vain. No property, no law, no bureaucracy can erase the truth. Standing up for what is right and accepting help when it comes can restore dignity, safety, and hope. Justice sometimes comes quietly, through the eyes of those willing to see what others overlook.